Hello, fellow dreamers. Welcome to my channel and my very first YouTube video. In today's video, we are going to cover applying to medical school as a dreamer. Before we begin, I'm going to share a little bit about myself. I am a DACA recipient and graduated from undergrad in 2012, which is right around the time when DACA became an executive order. So I went through all 4 years of undergrad as an undocumented immigrant and had a very hard time paying tuition. I worked like most of you probably are doing at the moment, and it was hard to find scholarships. And most medical schools at the time only accepted US citizens or permanent residents. Despite knowing this, I did attempt to start medical school in 2014 with very little success. I did not get accepted into any school. So, ever since my unsuccessful cycle, I have been working and decided to start the whole medical school application process again in 2020 for the 2021-2022 application cycle. So far, I've had two interviews and one acceptance. So I'm proud to say that I will be starting medical school in fall of 2022. So, dreamers, what has your journey to medical school been like? Make sure to share it in the comment section. All right, let's begin. So, if you're thinking of applying to medical school, there are two paths that you can take. You can go the MD path, the DO path, or both. So, the MD is what's considered allopathic medicine, which is what most people think of when they think of being a doctor. And that's the traditional thing, the traditional philosophy. And it's modern medicine and it emphasizes using medication to treat illnesses. DO, on the other hand, is osteopathic medicine, and the students who go this route usually study the same thing as those who are going the MD route. There's that there's more of a focus on treating the whole body instead of just a specific condition. And I believe there are some manual therapies involved with osteopathic medicine. If you're interested in learning more about DO and DO schools, I have included a link in the description below. As you're applying, it's important to know that there are different application services for MD and DO. So if you're applying to MD schools, you will be applying through the MCAS application service. And for DO schools, you will be applying through the AACOMAS application service. And to my dreamers in Texas, Texas schools have their own application service. So make sure that you do your research on that and you apply through that service. And then any other schools outside the state of Texas, you can apply through AMCAS or AACOMAS or AACOMAS. All right, let's look at the application timeline. So if you've done research, you know that the application cycle takes a very long time. It's strenuous, it's stressful, and there's a lot of waiting involved. So usually the application cycle begins in early May and goes until late April of the following year. So in early May, the MCAS and the AACOMAS application service is open. And at this point, you can start inputting stuff into those different services. You can also start submitting your primary application for AACOMAS, which is for DO schools, in around this time. In late May or early June, depending on what cycle you're applying, you will be submitting your primary application for MCAS. So, going back to the previous slide, the MCAS application for MD schools opens in early May, but you can't start submitting until late May or early June, depending on the cycle that you're applying for. So that gives you plenty of time to request your transcripts and to fill out all the required information before the submission date. And so it's important to know that you do need your transcripts before your application is verified, and we'll discuss that in a later slide. And also, it's important to know that You don't need to have your committee letter and or letters of recommendation or your MCAT score before you can submit your primary application through these application services. And for those applying, um, it's recommended that you take your MCAT no later than May 20 or May 22, just because outside from the pandemic, MCAT scores take a month to be released. During the pandemic, when I took it, it was a 2 week turnaround time, but that could be different. It could go back to its regular 30-day wait period. So we'll discuss why that's important in a later slide as well. All right. So around this time, your primary application for AMCAS and AACOMAS are being verified. So what does verify mean as far as the primary application? So verification entails matching information from your application, whatever you submitted, matching that with the transcripts that you've also sent to these application services. They'll make sure that the information that you put in the portal is the same information that's on your transcripts, and change anything that needs to be changed or contact you if anything needs to be updated. All right. So in mid-June, the verified ACOMAS primary applications, so for DO schools, that application is released to medical schools. In late June, the same thing, but this time for AMCAS, for MD schools, your primary application is released to medical schools. So that's why there's a strong emphasis on getting your MCAT, taking your MCAT in late May, specifically for the MCAS application, because by the time the MCAS releases your primary application to medical schools, they will have your score ready to review. Okay, so what happens in July? July, your secondary applications are sent. So once the schools get your primary application, they will start sending you secondary applications, which are specific to every single school. They all ask different questions. So it's many essays that you have to answer. Some of them are pretty short. I've heard that there's some schools that don't have a secondary application, and others are very long. For example, one of the schools that I applied to had so many questions, probably more than eight mini essays. And it's important to note that you have to pay for your primary application. And then for every secondary application, there's a fee that can range from like 80 to 130 or more. All right. So once your application is verified and complete, then adcoms, which stands for admissions committees, they start reviewing your application. So we've already mentioned what verified means as far as your primary application, but let's talk about what it means to be complete. Most medical schools will not review your application until it's complete. So they need your MCAT score, your letters of recommendation, or and your committee letter. And then some schools do require you to take additional tests, like the Casper, and we'll talk about that in a later video. So all that needs to be in before the school starts reviewing your application. So your application is verified and complete, including your secondary application, then the school, if they're interested, they will start sending you an interview invite. All right. So what happens in early August? If you're going the early decision program route, the deadline to apply is in early August. So the early decision program is when you're committed to only applying to one school because you're very interested in going there, and you still have to apply through the primary application services, and they will block you from applying to any other schools if you designate that you're doing whatever program that you are applying for is for the early decision program. And most do advise against doing this because it does put you at a disadvantage. Most schools have a deadline of October to make a decision of whether you've gotten accepted into the early decision program or not. So if you think about it, If the school does wait until October and they reject you, you can still apply for their regular program. And you can also add more schools to your list, but you have to go through the primary application again and designate those schools for regular admissions. And so that's in October, while most other applicants, for the most part, have already submitted their primary and secondary applications by this October date. And schools have already started reviewing applications, sending out interview invites, have already started interviewing students, and some have already gotten accepted by the time that they even look at your application. And with rolling admissions, you want to make sure that you're applying as early as possible to maximize your chances of getting in to any program while there's still a lot of seats available. All right. So, also in early August, that's when the first wave of interviews begin. Okay, so let's look at secondary application deadlines. For MD schools, most secondary application deadlines are from September to December. For most DO schools, they are from October to April of the following year. And from September to April, that is considered interview season. And there is a lot of waiting going on during this interview season because you're either waiting to hear back to get an interview. If you've already interviewed, you're also waiting to hear back if you've gotten accepted or not. So it's a waiting game. It's stressful, but at the end, it's worth it. It's worth it. All right. In mid-October, for MCAS, so for MD schools, they can start notifying applicants of acceptances. And so they can't do it before this mid-October date. For 2021, the date was October 15th. So that's the first day that schools started calling or emailing students that they've gotten accepted into their program. Now, if you don't get accepted on this date, there's no need to worry. Some students don't even get interviews by this time, by this October time. Others have gotten interviews, but their program specifically tells them when they will hear back, and it can be well past this mid-October date. So don't worry if you don't hear back from schools by mid-October. And we are finally in April of the following year. So this is when you have to commit to one school that you've gotten accepted in, and then you withdraw your acceptances from all other schools. All right, so this is the overview of the application cycle. I know there's a lot that I left out and I might have confused a lot of you, but I will go into more detail in future videos. All right, so I'm going to leave you with some tips. The first tip is to start early. Start early, do your research, know what you need to do, know what needs to be completed before you start your application cycle. So, for example, I'm matriculating in the fall of 2022, but I started preparing in spring/summer of 2020 to make sure that I had everything that I needed in a timely manner. And things can happen that are outside of your control. So try to the best of your ability. Try to start early, start lining up things. For example, start prepping for your MCAT. Make sure you have your prereqs done. We'll discuss that in future video. Make sure that you start aligning your letters of recommendations. If your school has a committee letter, you want to start that process as well. And you want to start writing your personal statement as well. Tip number 2, I can't imagine any institution that doesn't have a pre-health department. So if you are in undergrad, or even if you have already graduated and you're an alumni, try to join your school's listserv, your pre-health department's listserv, because there is an abundance of information on there that will keep you on track as far as applying. And there's also a lot of other resources as far as finding shadowing opportunities or some jobs. If you're taking a gap year or gap years, there might be some opportunities there for research, for jobs, scribing, anything. All right. My last tip is to use your pre-health department's committee letter, because the last thing you want is, if your school does offer a committee letter, you don't want an interviewer to ask you why you decided not to get that, to do a committee letter through your school. And I'll mention again that I graduated in 2012. And as an alumni, I was able to get a committee letter from my undergraduate institution in 2021. So make sure you just visit their website and see if you qualify for a committee letter if you're an alumni. And even if you're not, there might be certain things that you need to do. Just prepare yourself and make sure that you're ready to use their committee letter service. All right. Well, thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe if you would like more videos, and if you would like me to go into more depth of each step of the timeline in future videos. Also, feel free to ask any questions or leave comments of topics that you would like covered in future videos. I also plan to start a Dreamer Med community Google Drive, so that I can share outlines of my videos and other resources that will help you throughout the application cycle. If you're interested in me starting that for the MD, the Dreamer MD community, leave a comment so that I know whether I should start one or not. All right, thanks again for watching. Bye bye.